All right, seeing none, let's move to payment of bills. The president has asked me to take the invoice from ECRA that we had from last board meeting, and we'll have that as a separate vote. So what I'd like to do is, the first vote would be the payment of bills in our board packet tonight. Do I have a motion for that?
Resolved that the Board of Education, Township High School District 208, Cook County, Illinois hereby approves the payment of bills as presented and listed in the September 13, 2016 Board Agenda Packet.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Tim Walsh. Is there any questions?
So there were questions submitted on the bill. Scott, go ahead.
Hang on a second, Mike. Get the board book page.
Board book page 145. Starts the bills.
Yeah, but these were on page 160. There was a question about purchasing printers and computers, and what is the district process. I spoke with the director of technology, and there is a refresh cycle and an age of obsolescence report that is kept up. Basically, the director uses three key components to kind of determine where the computers fall. Number one is what's the needs of our students and the needs of our classes with particular computers, with laptops, desktops, printers, etc. And he kind of makes the decision based off of the needs. Also, he looks at the age of our printers, our desktops, our laptops, and makes a determination, are they still an asset, or do they have to start being refreshed and recycled and make new purchases? And the last thing that they look at is, what kind of repairs do these printers have, or laptops, or desktops? And if you can fix parts, they buy parts. They use parts from computers that are broken down as spares. So they are pretty savvy with maintaining all our computers keeping it within a budget that is set up with it. So that was the question about our computers and our printers.
And is that part of his, when he's sitting back and you're panning out the budget process, he comes back and he says he needs X
Yes, we
dollars?
visit that annually.
Right.
And just so the board understands, these are only teacher desktops or computer labs. We have some foreign language labs. We have some other labs that are still used by classrooms when they go to when the whole class goes there. And so we've only been replacing labs and teacher desktops that are over 8 years old. And this is our second year of Chromebooks, so we're hoping that as the entire population shifts to Chromebooks, then all we'll have to monitor is the teacher desktops and refresh the teacher desktops and printers. The teacher desktops cannot be replaced with Chromebooks because there's some of the technique lessons and some of the software that some of these teachers have for their classes and things that they use, that transition will take a couple years, but we have encouraged them to start shifting as much of that as possible to Chromebooks, because we do supply our teachers with a Chromebook as well. But a lot of the desktops are mounted to the ceilings, if I'm not mistaken, Dave.
Desktops are connected to projectors that are mounted on the ceiling.
Correct.
So would it be fair to say you already know, if you were to ask him for the details of his budget, you would know roughly how many laptops he's asking to buy, how many during this year, how many printers he's projecting to replace out, how many, right?
He tries to get his best guesstimate as to
Because he
what's gonna
gave
get.
you a number to put in the budget, right?
Correct.
Yes.
Scott wasn't here for that. But yes.
It's fair, but theoretically, if you went to ask him,
I talked with
he
him.
should have a picture in his head of what he thinks
Yes.
the cycle should be going through this year.
Correct. And also part of the tech director's goals this year, one of his incentives was to create an electronic system that monitors the number of support tickets we're receiving, as well as an age obsolescence and solution system. So that was already in his incentives, and he already has confirmed, and I've met with him and went through that incentive. That will be reported out in October.
So the second piece of it, so he's doing the budget, does everybody have to go through him to order
Yes.
computer equipment?
Correct.
So we're not, like
Nobody
somebody
can just
can't
randomly put in,
Oh.
unless They're part of that CTE and Perkins grant, which we worked through with that DVR, and that specific money that's from the federal government that they use for those classes. Otherwise, everything else is purchased through Mike.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Yes, on page Board Book 161, just a general question about what is put into the safety deposit box. The main things that's put into our safety deposit box are our monthly data that backs up our main server. And then also we have disks that have old emails that are backed up. This is just a emergency backup in case something happens here on site. We have backup to be able to restore stuff. from a
Archive
month ago.
tapes.
Backup tapes.
Okay. Any other ones?
Yes, Board Book page 162, there was a reimbursement to Rebecca Levine. This was for her son who came into school, registered on August 8th, and then withdrew on August 15th. So this is just a refund of the fees that were on his account.
All right, any other questions?
And the last question was on page 163 in regards to petty cash. The petty cash is based on a program with our life skills students in our special education department. $1,000 is given to them so that they are able to go out into the community and work on particular skills. So what we try to do is encourage them to be able to adapt to being able to use public transportation. So they go and travel on buses, by train, and then also the other portion of it is so that they can go shopping. Shop at various stores, be able to check out, be able to pay for it, and it's a great program to try to build those life skills for those particular students.
Okay, any other questions?
That is it on the bills.
Any other questions on this side of the room?
On the other
Mike,
list,
do you have any questions?
No.
On this side of the room, is there any?
Yeah, there was 3 questions on the other set of bills.
Not for me.
I'll tell you what they were, so you have to look them up. What, do we pay cancellation fee for buses now?
What was the other set of bills
So it
from?
was
You have the 2 different lists.
the concern on that one was that they were from May and June.
But I don't recall ever seeing us having a cancellation fee before.
So the bill was already paid in May?
May and June.
Do you have answers on those?
I do. I looked it up. There was 2 cancellations on baseball buses. For example, on that, I spoke with the athletic directors on that and just tried to get some clarification. We only have a small window of opportunity to cancel the games, and
So
be
if the
able to
bus driver
cancel.
pulls up and it shows
Pulls up
up,
and then it starts raining, unfortunately.
we have to pay for
I,
it.
have to pay
I don't
for it.
remember ever seeing a cancellation fee, that's all I was asking, if that's a new thing.
Yeah.
Okay,
What was the other ones from May?
Frontline Technology, that's basically our annual subscription for Applitrack to be able for people to apply for positions.
Okay.
And then there was a question on a washer dryer combo that was purchased for our home ec department to basically wash their towels within it, and it was under capital on it. They replaced a 9-year-old machine. It needed a repair of, I forgot what Joel told me the repair was, but it didn't make any sense to
Okay.
do the repair when a new one cost a
It's
couple
one piece,
$100.
it's one piece of equipment.
Yes, one piece of
Okay.
equipment.
any other questions?
I think there was one on a washer and dryer.
Yeah.
That was the one I
He
was
answered
looking
it,
at.
just said.
Mary Ann, you want to go for the vote?
Dr. King?
Yes.
Mr. Cindy?
Yes.
Mr. Walsh?
Yeah.
Mr. Welch?
Yes.
Mr. Gritchen?
Yes.
Ms. Ruska?
Yes.
Mr. Jepson?
Yes.
All right, the second part of the bill payment will be the ECRA, and I will do the motion for that. Resolve that the Board of Education, Township High School District 208, Cook County, Illinois hereby approves payment of the ECRA invoice that was originally presented at the August meeting. Do I have a second on that?
I'll second that.
Second by Laura. Any discussions?
The original bill that was presented in August for ECRA was the first half of their payment. There was concern presented at the August board meeting. In particular, Mr. Welsh had some concerns that we didn't receive the proper reports and and information that are spelled out in the contract. And so, the board at that time had asked me to do, an analysis to make sure that we're getting what we're paying for. And so, the steps that I took is that I met with 3 representatives from ECRA and the principal and assistant principal, and we went through the Exhibit A of the contract, which is the services and deliverables, and I asked for a hard copy of the items listed in the service and deliverables, which included, most of the, 95% of the information that we are getting from ECRA, using for ECRA, and we're using on a daily basis is for teacher evaluation and student performance and driving instruction and interventions at the building level. And they were able to produce an artifact, and Kristen was able to produce artifacts to show each item. I then took that information and met with the Curriculum Advisory Council to go through the ECRA contract and the information and the data that's being provided from ECRA to the building, and again, went through each of the artifacts. We did spend some additional time going through that statistical model and some of the concerns. I know Dr. Keene was trying to get a handle on how they're doing comparisons and some of the makeups of the model and how we're using the data that's in the models and the statistical models. I also went today and reviewed the tape presentation that Steve Humphreys gave, and I think it was in June of 2014, in his presentation to the board. And there were some questions asked by the board that I think could have caused maybe some confusion. When Steve was presenting, the board had asked about the data set and if it was customizable. And the data set is customizable, but it's only customizable for the data that they use for their model, which are their other clients, and for with our data. So there was a question asked at that board meeting on if we can be compared to the top 10%. And Steve answered yes, but in reality, they did that report for us, but they can only compare us on the data that's public because some of those schools may not be their clients, or all of those schools may not be their clients. At that meeting, he also did list, in general, about 6 high schools that they are working with or doing data analysis or different data projects for. He did not go into detail, but he did list some of those high schools. And so my analysis is that the services that we are paying for, we are definitely receiving. I think that the payment should be made. I think that the report that they gave us was unsatisfactory to the board, and I made that very clear in my meeting with ECRA that the board was disappointed, and the board, I thought they could have did a better job of sending somebody or preparing a report that would be more understandable to the board and to the community. But at the end of the day, I think they still completed the report that the board asked them to complete. We did receive, Mr. Walsh submitted an analysis of the contract. He felt differently, so I went through that analysis. I actually asked our attorney to review that analysis just to make sure I wasn't missing something. And our attorney also feels that they have delivered the services that are in the contract and that the bill should be paid. So that was the analysis that I completed based on what the board had asked.
Okay.
The attorney said that benchmarking wasn't a deliverable under that agreement, or that the provision that says if they want to make a claim for services that are outside the scope, they have 15 days to do it, and if they don't, they waive that right, but they still have to deliver it. Here's the issue. Nobody's questioning that the data that you got, you're happy with. The question is whether they had to deliver the reports that the board asked for. They tried twice, they didn't. And now after the fact, they're saying there's not a duty under the agreement to do that. And I just want to make it clear, because you have to rely on our outside counsel. Our outside counsel says that language in the agreement doesn't require them, where it says including but not limited to, deliverable, benchmarking.
I think
That doesn't include this report we asked for?
I think the concern is that they gave the report, but it didn't, the board felt that the report was not a good report and it didn't answer the questions the
Right.
board was looking for.
Right.
But I think they did the report, and they didn't submit a claim for payment on that.
You know, my feeling on this is, I mean, we're unhappy with the work they did for us, clearly.
Absolutely.
The district itself is relatively happy with the work that's been done. And, you know, and this happens all the time, even with my receivables sometimes with the firm, where, you know, you talk about it, and the amount of money involved here, I don't want to get in litigation with these people. And to me, this is a go-forward issue. You know, what do we use them for going forward? What do we make clear going forward as to what we need or want? And pricing, you know, if you can't give us this stuff, maybe you're not worth 35 grand.
That's my point.
So the
Yeah.
attorney, the school board's attorney did say, listen, if anything, you have some leg to stand on whether or not you renew their contract and whether or not you continue to pay at this price going forward.
Who looked at it?
Nikki, who's in attendance tonight,
Okay.
and Brian Crowley.
Oh, good, I can ask her if she's supporting the proposition that the delivery of the report wasn't required under that agreement. Because that's what we're being told here.
You know, one thing that we
Here,
learned in the
Let me
council.
just finish too, so.
I was just gonna
Yeah,
add,
sorry.
because the council also looked at it.
Right.
One of the things we learned, because of para, and I don't think this was made clear to all of us, the new laws require that student growth be incorporated into teacher evaluation and into everyday teaching. And there are a significant number of reports that ECRA is providing for the staff that they never had, never could generate themselves, that is helping them target every student in every class. It was a huge piece of work, and we just never saw that here at this level at the board. So for that work, if they didn't have ECRA, we'd be out of compliance with the state law of para,
Well, let
just
me-
to do our day-to-day teaching.
Let me just tell you what my perspective is. I'm not questioning the administration's analysis of whether the data is good and we're getting reports. We're paying $35,000 a year for it, though.
That's not
And
a
the
lot for
services.
what they're doing.
The services were broad scope. So I'll make a kind of silly analogy. If Nicholas comes back and says, we're not gonna, paint the ceiling or something, we're gonna say, no, that was part of the scope of the work. You either do it or reduce our funds. I feel the same way about this. Not questioning whether the data analysis they're doing is well. I don't understand it, relying on the administrator to do it. The question is whether they had a duty to deliver a report that satisfied us here, and they didn't. And I think the agreement clearly requires it, and either they should give us a credit or something, because they said they would deliver these services as part of it. We're not getting all of it.
When you say the board, I was satisfied with the report. You seem to assume that we all feel like you do. I understand it very clearly, but that's what I do. And 35,000 is not a lot of money. In fact, just to score one in-training exam cost over $30,000. So to do all the reports that ECRA's doing for every single student and every single teacher in every single class, $35,000 is a steal. Because to get psychometrics for all of that analyses and into the hands of the teachers and explain it so they can use it, that's cheap. We pay our attorneys their fair price. We pay our laborers their fair price. Why wouldn't we pay our statisticians their fair price?
Anybody else have any other comments on this side?
Yeah, I think this is sort of a new endeavor. And, I commend our administration for, investigating this. And I think Kevin, Dr. Skinkis is happy with the results. I think the board was maybe looking for something that's not yet there. And maybe we misunderstood what was actually going to be delivered. So Tim does have a point. But I agree with Ed that, this is something we have to go forward with. And since this is a very complicated topic, I have a hard time grasping it. I think the administration has to really present this in a way so we have a better concept of what actually is happening. What I gained from our meeting was that most of this data is based on internal RB data from years past. So we're comparing ourselves to ourselves. And we're not really having the external comparison, which I think is what the board wanted.
Yes.
Exactly.
Which Kevin, they said he would deliver that to us
So-
orally, right?
So in that tape that he mentioned, that I went back and watched, he said they can do it, but it has to be on data that's public, because they can't give growth data on schools they don't have information for, or if those schools don't release that information to be used in other
And he should
school
have told us
districts.
they don't have that much.
Right. So,
Yeah.
whether his sales job at the June 14th meeting was off, but I think after watching that today, maybe that's where some of this confusion is. But they did do the report that the board asked on the top 10, but it was all public information that, I mean, with the exception of time and doing an analysis, the board could have sat and made its own spreadsheet of cut and paste in their ACT scores, their demographics, because that's the only public data. They have the same access to the public data that we did. So John, I'll let you continue, because you're right about the internal comparison and some of that.
So I think it's hard to say that this is necessarily fair. I mean, because we don't have multiple bids for this, do we?
No.
No, not yet. But we can compare it to what it would cost us to hire an administrator to sort of do this type of work. So from that perspective, I guess we could say it's reasonable. I think we learn from this and we go forward and try to make it better. And I think we should take the lead and try to get this information out, even if it's our information, so that our taxpayers know that, you know, our goals are to encourage development of each of our students and to compare ourselves to outside schools to see how we're doing.
I want to make a comment. I thought that when the board gave you back in August to do some analysis, I thought you and your team did a real good job with it. And I think that you looked at all facets from there.
I asked ECRA to watch the video clip from the August meeting, and so one of the things I'm sure that they came in defensive of was some of the board members were, Tim in specific was saying that we should, that report was supposed to be 50% of their work. So I think one of the things that when I met with them, they were coming in to show us really how much they're doing. And at the report, they didn't have a problem doing the report at the board's request, but it doesn't define their true scope of work or what they're doing for us on a day-to-day basis. The one thing that I think is important to add, that when we went through by artifact, aligned with each scope of the contract, it's not user-friendly. It's not the kind of thing that we can put up in front of this board or on our website and say, oh, because it's even, I mean, John and Laura do, I mean, Laura does this for a living. John is a very bright man, and we went through, it took us a lot of time to go through some of the charts and even the color coding and statistically significant for a student that's academic vocabulary has grown since their freshman year. So there's stuff that the school district's using, there's program evaluations, but it's not, and I don't know if ECRA's really found, they have a porthole for us that we could put public, but I don't think the public would understand the porthole, because it's not, when you're talking statistics, it's not like cut and dry information of like, hey, we got a 21 and they got a 22. It's arrows and .05, you know, and .02 statistical significant. It's not user friendly yet. So there may be some things that as their company grows and our data grows that maybe we can tweak, but at this point, I still think we're receiving the services that were agreed to.
I will say one thing, the one report that really opened my eyes, because we're here to develop the students coming in here, to have them grow, to get them ready for college and the college ready. When they did that one study showing that 1 out of 3 students that come in here are not college ready, that scared me a little bit. But it also gave me some hope, because we can go back to the feeder schools and talk to them and say, here, how can we help you to increase that student's tour? And that was, to me, a very big piece, because it showed you where you can target, where you should be targeting to help those kids. Anybody else? Mike, do you have anything?
No.
Okay. All right, any more comments? Seeing none, Mary Ann, will you go for the vote?
Mr. Cindy?
Yes.
Mr. Walsh?
No.
Mr. Welch?
Yes.
Mr. Gritchen?
Yes.
Ms. Ruska?
Yes.
Mr. Jepson?
Yes.
Dr. King?
Yes.
Okay.